Welcome. So this is the fourth night of Buddhism in a nutshell. We're going to cover bodhicitta in just a bit. I want to show, as part of a review, a short video on karma. That hopefully will work. Chris? Can everyone hear that?
Your destiny is in the hands of God, or everything happens randomly, then you feel you have no control. There is no chance to create your future. In Buddhism, the recognition of the law of cause and effect, also known as karma, is a fundamental key to understand how you've created your world with actions of your body, speech, and mind. When you truly understand karma, then you realize you are responsible for everything in your life. Incredibly empowering to know that your future is in your hands. In this program, we will learn the basic laws of karma and how to change your world.
In this sixth program of our series, you'll learn about karma and the law of cause and effect. You'll begin to understand how your own actions of body, speech, and mind actually create your life experiences. And what actually determines the nature of any action, positive or negative, is our underlying motivation. Therefore, it becomes especially clear at this point the essential importance of the practice of motivation. Therefore, before listening to these teachings, in order to plant the most powerful seed we can in our mind streams for our own happiness and for the happiness of all other living beings, let us generate an especially strong motivation of bodhicitta, the highest intention possible, in order to be able to reach enlightenment as quickly as possible, to liberate other sentient beings from their sufferings, and bring them to the perfect happiness of enlightenment as well.
Very direct.
Where did you come from? Well, Christians and the rest say you came from God. Western materialists say you came from mummy and daddy. The Buddha says you came from previous moments of your own consciousness. Right? So the implication here is kind of central to all the practice in Buddhism. And this is the implication here is the concept of karma, cause and effect. Karma. Okay? This, if you like to find a creative principle in Buddhism, this is where it is. This is what you'll find. If you want to find who am I, why am I, who made me, where do I come from, why is the world the way it is, why is there suffering, why are there sons and daughters? The answer in Buddhism is karma. If you ask the question, who made me, the Buddha says very directly, you did. So this conscious idea, but it's very empowering because it says I can change it.
Remember we talked about how karma expands if it's not dealt with, if it doesn't right, or is not purified, it expands.
What I would call karma, actions and their results, is in four, possesses four main characteristics. The first is that whatever action is being created, it will definitely bear its effect, its corresponding effect. The second is that whatever action has been accumulated, its result would be experienced on an increased level. It means it increases and bears wider and larger results than the action itself. Then the karma, which is, or the action, an action which is not being created cannot be experienced, and whatever actions has been created is its effect will be experienced. It's not going to be lost. Therefore, this is why it is extremely important for us to do not let even a single day go by without purifying the negative karmas, the negative actions we have accumulated that day, and therefore this is why I keep advising that before you're going to sleep every night, review the day, check what you have done, recognize the negative actions, the positive actions you have accumulated, and rejoice on the virtues, so that you keep multiplying those virtues by rejoicing, and make a strong determination that again you're going to do like that also the next day, and so forth, and also recognize the negative actions that you have accumulated, apply the four opponent powers. In short, make sure that you attempt to purify those particular actions, negative actions accumulated that very day, to stop their multiplying force, their increasing force, and you generate a strong determination that you're not going to engage in those actions again in the next day. So this is a very important practice to be taken in your hand. In brief, what should be done all the time is to practice awareness of the three doors of the body, speech, and mind. When you are alone, practice awareness of the mind. What's going on in my mind right now? Is my mind going into virtues or non-virtues? And while recognizing that the mind is going into non-virtues, apply the opponents, the opponent powers to that particular non-virtues, and bring back the mind to virtues. And while you find yourself with others, you should mainly apply awareness in your speech. Actually, for those who want to be happy, even while experiencing great mental hardships, all they have to do is to place confidence in the karma. Then you know that sufferings comes as a result of previously accumulated actions. If I have accumulated these particular actions myself, nobody else is going to experience the result but myself. Therefore, by experiencing these getting rid of a huge load of negative karma they have accumulated in the past. And that itself serves to clear completely the mind from any hardships, even at time of incredible difficulties.
He's saying virtuous and non-virtuous. The translation is a little difficult to follow.
If we investigate what is the essential teaching of the Buddha, what is the single most important teaching of the Buddha? Some people say it is the teaching on compassion, or which in its highest form is the teaching about bodhicitta. Some people might say that the most important teaching of the Buddha is the teachings of the true nature of self and phenomena, the wisdom teachings of the Buddha. Some people may say something else, but I think what we have to say is the single most important teaching of the Buddha is the teaching on the law of cause and effect, about karma. This is the single most important teaching of the Buddha because it contains within it all of the other teachings. By understanding the law of cause and effect and practicing it in one's life, it is the way to develop love and kindness and compassion and eventually bodhicitta. By practicing the law of cause and effect in our daily life, it is being wise, and it is the way to develop wisdom. And by practicing, giving central importance in our daily life to observing the law of cause and effect as the single most important thing moment by moment, by doing that, we develop renunciation. There is the chance for some momentary happiness. We are very attached to momentary happiness, but then we remember the teaching on the law of cause and effect, and we remember that if I do something to get this momentary happiness, maybe I have to lie to get it, maybe I have to steal to get it, or do something. Certainly I at least have to follow my attachment. I have to follow my desire, and therefore I create negative karma. It's a negative action, puts a negative imprint in my mind. In order to get this little moment of worldly happiness, I create the potential for suffering in the future. Practicing the law of cause and effect is the key to developing every quality on the path to liberation and enlightenment. So that is the fundamental refuge. Understanding the law of cause and effect, developing faith in it, putting a key emphasis to being mindful of the law of cause and effect in our daily life, so that we can observe it. It's like Mr. Rimshay makes this joke, just ordinary mindfulness is not good enough. Now I'm picking up the knife, now I'm stabbing this person, now I'm stabbing this person very carefully. That kind of mindfulness is not helpful. Real mindfulness has this moral connotation of knowing, being aware that one is doing something that is either virtuous or non-virtuous. Knowing that this thing is going to produce suffering now and in the future, or this action of body, speech or mind is going to produce some happiness now and in the future. We need that kind of mindfulness. Mindfulness mixed with an understanding and faith in the law of cause and effect. And the stronger the faith, the stronger the energy to withhold from doing negative things, thinking negative things, saying negative things, and doing negative things. And also the more we understand the law of cause and effect, we develop a deeper understanding of what is negative, what is harmful to ourselves and others. So that is the key teaching, the key practice.
This Venerable Amy Miller teaches here every year. She was just here weekend before last.
Fast-paced environment. When you're in Washington, D.C., part of your work and in politics is people lie, and that's part of your business, is to lie. In fact, you are encouraged to lie, and you're rewarded for lying.
Did you see this? Okay.
Fantastic, you got $5,000 from them. Great, and so we would tell lies all the time, and I never thought that there was any problem. I thought that was how I was supposed to be. So then, in my late 20s, when I came in contact with the Buddhist teachings in Nepal, and I heard the teachings on karma, and these teachings were hard to listen to. I mean, they were teachings that, if you lie, then you're going to create the cause for no one to ever believe you in the future. And if you steal, you will create a result that people will steal from you, and you will lose valuable things that you value. And there were all these teachings that, if I did these bad things, then bad things were going to happen to me. And when you get angry at somebody, you're creating the cause for someone to get angry at you and yell at you. And I didn't like to get yelled at. I don't think anybody does. So I left the teachings with what we call the 10 non-virtues, and sometimes called the 10 ethical guidelines of, not stealing, not killing, not creating sexual misconduct, things like that, not lying, gossiping. And I started to work with those. I started to just try one, because lying in my work had been a big thing. I was really used to that. So I got a new job when I came back to America, and I was trying to be really careful not to lie. And I did have some experiences in some workplaces where I didn't think people listened to me. And for 2 years, I very seriously went after the lying. I was very careful in my relationships not to lie. And I was very careful in work, in business conduct with people that I wouldn't lie. And after like 2 or 3 years, something started to change. And I felt people were listening. And people did believe me. It started to really change my world. They say that sometimes when you change your ethical behavior by speaking the truth, by cultivating life and helping to save lives and freeing animals and being respectful in my relationships with people, particularly intimate relationships, and cultivating harmony in them, and trying to practice taking care of my possessions and treating other possessions with respect, people if I borrowed something. And all these things of right speech, speaking the truth, and really trying to use my speech meaningfully, not gossiping all the time, and not criticizing people and judging people, and not kind of dividing people in speech, and trying to have positive thoughts about things. I noticed that things changed. When you wake up in the morning, you have 2 choices. You can have a good day, or you can have a bad day. And even when bad things happen to you, depending on your reaction to them, you could say, bad thing happened to me today, but I'm not going to get angry at my friend because just going to create this situation of anger to come back at me. You know, when you start to understand it that way, then you stop reacting. Why did they do this to me? This is not fair. With karma, there's no more injustice. Things might look like it's not fair, but basically it's something you created. So the nice thing with karma is it puts you at the controls. There isn't anybody doing it to you. You're not a victim. You're basically in charge of what kind of seeds you'd like to plant from here on out. So by watching my activities, the activities really in my body, speech, and mind, I feel like that's going to create a good chance for me in the next go round.
For me, the Buddha's instructions were similar to that of a business plan. You know, if your forecast, you know, if your plan, you know, doesn't have a proper foundation, then all your forecasting is going to go off. It's just not going to succeed. I realized then I better look at what are the problems I'm facing in the company, and then I better look at what seeds I planted in the past, you know, because all my suffering has come from a cause. The major problem we had was inventory pilferage, stock pilferage and losses. And so, you know, every year, you know, merchandise, clothing, you know, people steal them from our warehouse, from our shops, and we don't know about it till the end of the year when we look and we say, oh my God, so many goods are missing, you know. So then I realized by looking at the teaching that, through investigation, you know, I realized the cause of that was stealing. Now you say, now how does stealing have to do with losing inventory? But then stealing can mean many things also, you know. And I realized that sometimes our company did not pay on time, you know. So by delaying payment could be considered also stealing. So when I realized that, I said to myself, this must change. So we had to renegotiate with our suppliers to get longer credit terms and then honor those due dates that we said we would meet. You see? So that was what we had to apply, that antidote, so that we could stop the cause of more further losses and further pilferage. You see? So something had to be done. We had to do it straight away. So this was the answer we thought we would have to do. The result of that, since 2 years ago, is that our inventory losses have come down. You see? So this really shows me that, you know, Buddha's teachings do work. The more that I see that happening, it really inspires me to study Dharma, because that way, you know what, you can change your life. You know, I could change my life. You know, if I didn't like the causes of, if I didn't like what's going on, you know, Buddhism is kind. It allows you to change, but you know, so that you can create your own happiness. But you need to understand that you're creating your own suffering. And I needed to understand that I was creating my own suffering. Nobody was doing it to me. It was myself, my causes from the past. And I could say that, well, you know, I don't think I did that. I don't think I did that. If my memory cannot even remember 6 months ago, then how can I remember all the bad deeds I've done 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I don't. But the point is, I've created this garden. It's got a lot of weeds, you know. So I have to spend my time reading purification, collecting merit, studying teaching, and devoting myself to the Dharma, all things that will create more happiness. And then by me being happy, then I can benefit sentient beings, because they are happy to be working in the company. They're happy because they say, you know, things are going well and they will be rewarded too. So everybody benefits.
So that was, we talked about a lot of those issues last week. Do you remember when we talked about karma, how it expands if it's not dealt with, if it doesn't ripen, or it's not purified, then it expands, increases. Susie has a practice every day where she does Vajrasattva practice. It's a purification practice. So discussion, questions about any of that, what you saw in the video? The last student I thought was, I wouldn't normally include that because it kind of got long, but it's a very practical viewpoint of karma. She owned a shop and she was saying inventory. You know, some of her pronunciations were difficult to understand, but we don't always think of karma as having such an immediate effect. We generally think of it as something that's going to ripen in the future.
Very, very far out.
But Tara had a viewpoint where this was affecting her daily. And of course, I think that's, you know, clearly we see that in our own lives. If you're in our workplace or in our family, if we're rude or we're angry, people are going to avoid us. You know, nobody wants to be around an unhappy person. And when you're glad to see people and you're always smiling and so forth, people are attracted to you. So there's a real practical aspect to karma in that way. Any questions about any of that? Sure.
Sorry, I
Yes.
wasn't here last week, but she spoke to purification.
Yes,
Oh,
it's a
sorry.
directional. There you go.
She spoke to purification,
Yes.
being teachings and merits. I mean, I guess I missed some of that.
Sure.
last week, so I don't- yeah.
And it would be real easy to go through those slides. So, let's see. Oops. So, and again, this is a review. We can do it really quickly. Karma just means action. It's a Sanskrit word, cause and effect. So everything we do is either virtuous or non-virtuous, as opposed to good or bad. So, and this thing, it's not working either. I'm so sorry that we're technically challenged here recently. This was what Venerable Tubin was talking about, how nothing comes into being without a cause. Again, karma is a really convenient way to explain all of the Buddhist teachings. All of the Buddhist teachings are included in karma. So I made this slide to show how the Four Noble Truths can be viewed from the aspect of karma. So the Four Noble Truths, of course, are the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of sensation of suffering, and the truth of the path. So if you look at this chart, the number 2, the origin of suffering, causes the number 1, causes suffering, the truth of suffering. The truth of the path is a cause for the sensation of suffering. That's the truth of the sensation, the Fourth Noble Truth. I had some formatting issues. I don't know why those are in different fonts. Let me see. Yes. Okay, we're trying to get to purification. So these are the 10 non-virtuous actions that Venerable Amy Miller was talking about, the killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. And the fourth of speech, and it's not just lying, it's also, as you see, slander. It's also gossiping. I mean, in that you're gossiping, that you're wasting people's time in gossiping. And this 3 of mind, you know, when I was first learning about karma, I was so disappointed that karma can be thoughts. I was like, I'm pretty good about not creating non-virtuous karma with my body, or saying things, you know, killing things, you know. And then I see, you know, that actually your thoughts can be non-virtuous.
What is wrong views?
So you could, I think a more accurate, instead of wrong, is wise. And it's going to be, that's in regards to emptiness and into how things exist. In a wrong view is to the assumption that everything exists the way it appears, that everything exists inherently from its own side, or without a previous cause or condition. That's a wrong view, to assume that things exist without a prior cause and condition. And so here we're also including this idea of consciousness in our discussions of karma and rebirth. Again, all of these issues are explained in karma. The consciousness is not physical. It can only be produced by something that's non-physical. And we understand that the brain, being blood and tissue and so on, that clearly it's physical. But consciousness is not. Our awareness that we have is not physical. And we're going to talk about that more next week. And we just went over this, and they talked about this in the video. So here's your purifications, and I have a handout that I didn't bring. So the first one, of course, is that there's no guilt in Buddhism, but there is certainly regret. I wish I had not done that. Usually we quickly realize when there is a non-virtuous action that's causing some people to suffer. Reliance on the teachings so this the monk Rupa, I can't ever pronounce his name, but the one that didn't speak English, he was talking about every day review your actions of the day and rejoice in those virtuous actions, and then the non-virtuous actions, be aware of your regret, be aware of how you can have refuge and reliance in the teachings, and the remedies for, I'm not going to do that again. I'm aware of how I acted, or I'm aware of how I generated this non-virtuous action, and the remedy is that I'm aware of it, and then I'm going to resolve not to do those things again. And again, this is a way of dealing with our non-virtuous actions in a positive way, as opposed to being depressed or sad or upset with ourselves because we generated this non-virtuous action. Does that help? Okay. Yes, Susie.
I was going to say, who was the monk that you said was talking?
He is
just his name. Well, the monk.
Rupa Rinpoche.
Oh, not him. The another one.
Oh, the Stuven Dundrum, the Australian teacher.
Yeah. Well, the Australian monk. When he said you could do something and you can choose between actions, and I could have taken that wrong if I didn't know more, that you can't do fun things. In fact, on Sunday, Geshe-la was talking about it's fine to enjoy things. The trick is to not get attached to it, so that you always have to have it, or some people have to have their coffee. You can enjoy your coffee, but you don't have to become a horror if you don't get your coffee. It's a simple example.
Trying to go to my next slide. So.
And I can also say on the four opponent powers, there are many practices, or there are a number of practices that you can learn about. But just even the idea of going through it in your mind is very helpful.
Whew. Okay. So in this, the three principal aspects of the path is a teaching by Lama Tsongkhapa. When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, that fourth noble truth, the truth of the path, this is what we're talking about. This is Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of this school, of the Gelugpa school, also started the tradition of the Dalai Lamas. He trained in the first Dalai Lama and established that lineage of Dalai Lamas. He's represented by these statues here with the gold hats. So we're like the gold hat tradition. And some of them are quite humorous. So in the first one, in the renunciation, we've talked about that in discussing the Four Noble Truths, karma, samsara. What we're renouncing is attachment to those things. We're renouncing our existing in this cycle of birth, old age, death, and sickness. I'm losing my voice. So in this renunciation, like Susie's talking about, we're not talking about giving up your chocolate cake. We're not talking about giving up things that make you, that you enjoy in life. There are many deliciousness, there are many things that are delicious in samsara. There are many things that are delicious in this human existence. What we're saying in renunciation is that we understand that these things that we are enjoying can become a source of suffering if we become attached to them, if we become, if we cling to these things. And we've used things like chocolate cake as an example, or cheesecake. That, you know, that first piece is delicious. That third, fourth, fifth, sixth piece might not be so delicious. And that's an example that we use. So that's what we're talking about in renunciation. So tonight we're going to talk about bodhicitta. This is the core of the Mahayana tradition. This is the essence of Tibetan Buddhism. Bodhicitta is the altruistic wish to become enlightened to benefit everyone else. Now this is a pretty amazing concept, and I've just blurted it out as though it's this really simple thing. So bodhicitta. So citta is mind, bodhi is enlightened. So it's the enlightened mind that seeks to benefit all sentient beings. Now there are a few methods that Lama Tsongkhapa and others developed to learn and deal with this. So before you could wish to be enlightened to benefit all beings, all sentient beings, all beings that can feel pain, you're going to have to understand and accept that this idea of equanimity. And we do this by comparing these three ideas: friend, enemy, and stranger. So an example of friend, anybody, just shout it out, Susie. Friend. You. Thank you. But it's generally someone that pleases you, someone that you enjoy being around. That's someone that oftentimes a friend is yeah, well, I mean, it's someone you enjoy being around. I mean, there's this long explanation. I'm trying to remember this. You know, it's like 3 paragraphs. It's not coming to me. An enemy. I mean, we're all understand that this is someone who's done us harm, someone that wishes us harm, someone that talks about us, lies to us, steals from us. You know, there's any number of ways to describe enemy. And then stranger, again, it's just someone we don't know, someone we don't have an opinion about. When we think of the 3 of these, our friend was at one time a stranger. Certainly. Our spouses, strangers. Oftentimes, an enemy used to be a friend. It certainly was a stranger. So we have this meditation on equanimity. It takes a long time. I've been in classes where we do it and I enjoy it, but I'm not the best leader of meditation. But the idea is that you imagine like 3 chairs and sitting in front of you, and you have imagine that there's a friend sitting in one chair. Imagine that there's an enemy. I mean, a real person, someone that you have an adverse opinion of, someone that you, when they come in the room, you just tighten up. So this is a real person you're imagining. And then a stranger, someone that you just pick out from the mall, the airport. And then practice swapping these around, remembering when that enemy was a stranger. Maybe it's a new job. You saw this person, and when you first saw them, you thought, well, that, you know, they seem to be nice enough. And then you find out that they're trying to steal your job. They're lying about you so that they can get promoted and so on. We all know those things. They steal your parking spot. But when you first saw that person, they were a stranger. So, and the same thing with friend. And sometimes these all can swap back and forth, friend and enemy. Sometimes can swap back and forth. You know, you forgive them. We all come in to group hug, and then they're being mean to you again. So the idea I'm trying to get across is that before you can be a bodhisattva, before you can have this altruistic wish, this altruistic desire to become enlightened, to benefit all sentient beings, you've got to think of everyone as a friend, as one of the examples we use is as your mother. Now, this is not always easy for people. So this is called, this is Tibetan. This is from the Lama Tsongkhapa, and you'll see this in other traditions as well. Sometimes it's 7 causes and effects, but the way it's taught in the Gelug tradition is 6 causes and 1 effect. So the first cause of bodhicitta, we're talking about again this idea of becoming enlightened to benefit other people, is to recognize all beings as your mother. Now, from the Buddhist perspective, there's rebirth. See, we talked about karma. We talked about how this, where rebirth comes from, is this idea of how consciousness exists. One moment of consciousness, this present moment of consciousness was preceded by a prior moment of consciousness, and so on, without beginning, without end. That's what the Buddhists posit. And if that's true, then we've all been each other's mothers. We've all been each other's fathers. We've all been each other's siblings. And so this is a way, understanding that this idea is that because of rebirth, that everyone has been each other's mother. So in just accept that for a moment, that everyone has been each other's mother. Let's think a moment about the kindness that our mother has shown us. Now, everyone has had a good relationship with their mother. I did. I've met people that haven't. I've met people that didn't know their mother, and so on. But so if you didn't have a good relationship with your mother, imagine someone that you did have a positive relationship. That kindness that your mother showed you cannot compare to anything else. Taught you how to walk, taught you how to eat, cared for you when you're just a peanut. Yeah. And so the third cause of this effect is the wish to repay the kindness that your mother showed you, paying it forward. This warming love, and these actually have the kind of love that a mother feels when looking at her only child. Now we're talking about you having this emotion for a complete stranger, walking down the mall. In this number 4, this heartwarming love, here you generate the same kind of affectionate love towards all sentient beings, perceiving all beings in a beautiful and glowing way. That's a lot for that one line there. Compassion. I mean, we all know what compassion is. The way it's described in the sutras is, what is the measure or sign of having generated great compassion in your mind? It is that you feel towards all beings the same wish for them to be free of suffering that a mother would feel for her only child. The compassion that they're talking about is the compassion a mother would have for a 2-year-old child, their 2-year-old child that was getting ready to walk off a cliff. It's 15 feet away, you can't get to it, it's getting ready to step off the edge of a cliff. that compassion. And having that compassion for someone you don't know, a stranger. Firm intention, we set our intention at the beginning. Each one of these classes, when we study karma, we talk about the importance of volition, the intent behind the action. And the way this intention is described, this is extraordinary intention because it's similar to being in the position of saving someone from falling off a cliff. Well, there you go. And that you're responsible for saving that person. So the effect of these 6 causes is bodhicitta. Discussions, questions about any of that?
Going back to karma.
Sure.
So if we're asking at night to be forgiven, or maybe something from a long time ago, is the only way to do that through prayer, or is there some intentions some works you should be doing, or?
Well, that's several questions there, and the first one is the implication that there's something or someone to answer prayer from. Growing up in the West and growing up in Christian or Judeo traditions, we all have had that. Most all of us have had that training. In Buddhism, there's no God. There's no creator. Buddha was just a normal person, had these skills, developed his mind. So the prayers that we do in Buddhism are aspirations. Prayers are training our mind to be compassionate, training our mind to wish other beings to be free from suffering. So that time that you spend alone in meditation, prayerfully wishing that others are free from their suffering, is going to purify your own non-virtuous actions. Is that fair, Jim? Susie? Is that? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So much of this can be very practical. It's like Rinpoche was talking about, the end of the day, every day, reviewing your actions for that day, identifying what you did well and what you did not do well, identifying the things that you handled skillfully and the things that you did not do skillfully. That is training yourself. That is training your mind to be skillful in the future. Yes, Susie. Thank you.
If you don't mind, it would be that you would forgive yourself.
That's what I've been fixing to blurt out.
Thank you. Good.
Okay,
Now,
good.
I was going to ask you, it seemed like if you can't forgive yourself, well, of course I've been told.
Well,
If you can't forgive yourself, nobody else can forgive
thank
you.
Thank you for that. So the first, when you're developing this altruistic intention to become enlightened to benefit all sentient beings, you start with yourself. You start with yourself. It's like wanting to be a lifeguard at the pool but not knowing how to swim. So somebody's drowning in the deep end and you haven't learned to swim yet. So the first is compassion for yourself. It starts with yourself. Having the same loving kindness for yourself that your mother did, that your mother had for you. Each one of those 6 causes is talking about yourself first.
And after you forgive yourself, sometimes people go back to it over and over every night. But the idea is to say, I forgive myself, and here's what I'm going to do about it. My next step is to be a better person, is to do this little thing, and little by little. Is that right, Steve?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I just want to make sure I don't want to teach your class, but.
No, thank you. So this idea of bodhicitta, the question arises, am I capable of this? I mean, it's the first. What skills do I have to save people? I mean, this is what they're saying, is saving people, rescuing them from their suffering, their pain. And I think the first thing you could imagine is that probably today I'm not a bodhisattva, but understanding that Buddhas, becoming a Buddha is what's going to be required to become a bodhisattva, to develop bodhicitta. Now we have bodhicitta vows. I haven't taken those. I've taken lay vows. I've taken refuge vows and lay vows, and I mean I'm not sure I'm there yet, to be honest. Questions about that? Yes, please.
Well, basically, every single day you should be striving to achieve bodhicitta.
Every moment.
Okay. All right.
So an example. Could leave this class and stop by the food line on my way home, get a quart of ice cream and a bag of cookies. I'm in the express lane, and there's a lady there with a grocery cart overflowing with stuff. There's one clerk in the whole store, and they're working the express lane, and I'm behind this lady. My ice cream's melted. But if you were bodhicitta, if you had bodhicitta, you'd be happy that this woman was able to get in line in front of you. You would rejoice in that. How hard is that? Wendy, how hard is that? The traffic light. The light turns green, they're still sitting there.
That's when you need right speech.
Yeah.
Right honking.
So this Amy Miller, Venerable Amy Miller example. Imagine that you are going to meet a friend you haven't seen in a long time, going to Panera Bread at North Hills. You've got your tea, coffee, whatever your beverage is, you've got it in your car, you've got your coffee, you've got your music playing, your favorite station, favorite CD. You get on the belt line, you're going around this friend you haven't seen in ages. So they're looking forward to this, seeing this friend. And this car comes in the on-ramp and cuts you off, and you slam on brakes, you spill your tea, skidding your tires, your CD jumps. Daggone it, you're going to pull up beside that person and give them the finger. And when you pull up and look over there, it's your mom. Bodhicitta. If you had bodhicitta when you got in the car, it had never occurred to you. Your concern would have been for the other car. They weren't paying attention. Where were they going? And if it really was your mom, whose car is she driving? Why is she not paying attention? That same concern that you would have when you look over there and you see it's your mom, the same concern you would have for your mom, bodhicitta is having that for a stranger, having that same compassion, that same concern for the stranger. It's powerful. Please, Susie.
I thought you were going to give a different example.
Okay.
I love that one.
Well, give yours.
She noticed that when she was in the airport, people were rejoicing, seeing their relatives coming, and she started looking at strangers and saying, "Oh, they're here! Great! They got off the plane. Everything looks good." She was rejoicing for people she didn't know, and it ended up. I don't want to speak for her, but I think she said it ended up being a great feeling.
Well, see, Stephanie has an example. Stephanie Stevens. She went to the airport to pick up her mother, and the secure area was below an escalator, so she couldn't go past. She couldn't go past the security to get the elevator. She was standing there watching the elevator, and this lady would get on the elevator. That's not my mother. This other person get on. That's not my mother. This other people. That's not my mother. And she got to thinking. Stephanie got to thinking. Do you remember that story?
Maybe it was Stephanie instead of Venerable Amy. I probably is Stephanie.
Well, see, Stephanie could be quoting Venerable Amy.
Whatever. It's a good story.
Yeah, and so she goes through this whole process again, seeing all these these different people and just meditating on, that's my mother, that was my mother, that was my mother, that was my mother. So, Chris, you haven't said much? Questions, comments, observations? Bodhicitta. So this is the second of the three principal aspects of the path. Again, this is the core of Mahayana Buddhism. When we've talked about the three Buddhist schools, Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, the Hinayana's personal liberation. It's not a derogatory term, although it can sound that way. The Hinayana tradition is the you have to become enlightened, you have to become aware, you have to have renunciation. It's kind of like the bottom steps of a ladder. To get to the Mahayana, to become bodhicitta, you've got to start somewhere. I mean, you guys didn't come in here to benefit every sentient being in the world. You came here to learn something about yourself. I mean, we all did. We all do. I still do. This is my practice. So, but bodhicitta is the essence of Tibetan Buddhism. And I've probably got some long-winded slides when I sit here and try to decide what to talk about. There's a prayer that I'm supposed to teach. It's the foundation of all good qualities. Every stanza in the foundation of all good qualities describes every aspect of the path, from the Four Noble Truths and renunciation to emptiness. So this was written in the 1300s. If you can get the whole prayer if you go to the Kadampa website, Kadampa-media, and you click on spiritual programs, there's a button that says Buddhism in a Nutshell, and then there's like 8 or 9 handouts, and this is one. So again, in the 1300s, so 650 years ago. So praying to be able to free all sentient beings. I don't understand the migratory word. Do you, Jim? Do you know why they use that? Why he used that? Yeah. Lama Tsongkhapa, that's how you pronounce the T is silent, Tsongkhapa. Sounds like I'm saying a whole lot. So Rinpoche was talking about bodhicitta without the morality, stabbing someone mindfully. So this idea of bodhicitta, what the assertion here is not possible without a foundation in morals and ethics. So the three types of morality in this poem, I think I have another, nope, I've run out of slides. So the three types of morality in this, as relates to this prayer, is refraining from negative activities of body, speech, and mind, the 3 doors. Morality of accomplishing virtue and performing virtuous actions. And then the morality of working for the benefit of sentient beings. And I don't think I've been taught that until I was preparing these slides. I didn't know what that was. So, that's a lot to think about. So questions, discussion. So in the Buddhist tradition, this discussion, the reason I keep asking for questions is it's the way we all learn. We asking questions, we teach each other. I learn from your questions. Sometimes I'm asked questions that I don't know the answer to, so that's something I have to go out and learn for the next time. Or comments.
I was, oh, good.
Good. Anybody?
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Steve?
Yes, please. So this is all streamed and uploaded to YouTube. Is why we use the microphones.
Right. So you mentioned that you had taken the Bodhisattva vows.
Bodhisattva
correct?
vows. Mm-hmm.
Right. So at what point does that happen in your progression of?
It's entirely up to the individual. We're all on a different path. Yeah. I was present when Chris took his. Chris took them. Mm-hmm. Yes, Lisa.
So when is it and how is it determined that you're ready for a certain level?
Good. You. And so when and they're encouraged us to talk about ourselves, our own experience. I came to Kadampa by happenstance. I was taking online courses. I'd taken several Buddhist courses from college, some college level. I was looking for another online course, and FPMT, our umbrella organization, has all these teachings are available online. So I was taking Discovering Buddhism, it was a 2-year course online. As I was logging into the classroom portal, I noticed on the toolbar was a button that said Centers. And I clicked on that, and you know, there was one in Raleigh. I had no idea there'd be one in Raleigh. There's only 13 in the United States, 18 in the United States. One of 18. Yeah. Yeah. And so I live in Cary. I was here the next day, and so I came here for a couple of years just for my own benefit. I mean, I got the bodhicitta. I understood that it's important to. You can't be happy and angry at the same time. I mean, so much of it was just common sense and made sense to me. But it was because of Geshe-la that I took refuge vows. And when I showed our lineage of teachers that starts with Geshe Sangpo, Geshe Gaelic, the 2 resident monks that we have here, Tibetan monks. Geshe Sangpo escaped from Tibet at 12. Went to the monastery, graduated with a Geshe Longrenpa degree, PhD with honors, and Geshe Gaelic in the monastery age 7. And he's Longrenpa, that's with honors. So cum laude. I just had a real connection to Geshe Gaelic, and when I learned about the refuge vow, so to become a Buddhist, you would take these vows to refuge vows into 3 jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the historical figure, not him as a person, but his accomplishments. You know, that he's this regular person that using only his mind, the only instrument he had to explore this suffering that he saw in the world. The only instrument he had was his mind. And so through meditation, he tuned and calibrated, so to speak, his mind, just like a scientist would a microscope or a telescope. And to have, I think it's inspiring to know that this intellectually gifted, but human being, was able to accomplish what he did. I take refuge in that. That it's in some life, I will be able to do that. We all have Buddha nature. We all have the ability to become Buddhists. We all will become Buddhists eventually. The Dharma is a Sanskrit word that means that which upholds. So it's not Buddha Dharma. It's Dharma that upholds the Buddhist teachings. All of the Buddhist teachings, the canons, the sutras, the scripture, so to speak, what the Buddha taught, and then the practices, the rituals that we have here, that's the Dharma. And so taking refuge in that, in those teachings, in those traditions, in those rituals. And then the Sangha, in the East, in Asia, Sangha is just the Buddhist and the monks and nuns generally. In the West, we consider the Sangha our community, the people, other practitioners. And so, you know, Jim and Susie and Chris and I we're each other's Sangha, so to speak. And so I take refuge in that they are on a path similar to mine. It's parallel in many ways, And so in the refuge ceremony that you would take with a accomplished teacher, you vow that when you have issues that you're going to take refuge in those three things. And I saw that as a powerful enabler for me, as opposed to casually practicing, reading casually, you know, in other words, not having a set pattern of practice. Taking those vows helps me when I'm annoyed with the lady in the express lane with the basket full. That's where I get my ability to appreciate her suffering, her issues. So I converted. I mean, I was baptized as a child. Never really practiced that. I mean, my parents were very involved and very devout Christians, but it just didn't, for reasons I would bore you, it just didn't take with me. And so after I'd been coming here for a couple of years, and I saw that as a aspect of this practice, that actually converted to Buddhism and took those vows with Geshe. And he gives you you get a Buddhist name, a Tibetan name. Mine's Lobsang Dawa, means noble moon. But it's a very common name. It's like Joe Smith. It really is a very common name. And Lobsang is both male and female. I've seen it both in both genders. That was a long explanation. Okay, Wendy, thank you.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you. We have a question down here, Susie. Okay.
It's for me, because we don't live here close by, so
Sure.
we can't always come to things. But I guess the hardest thing I have to do is what meditations to do.
Yes.
Especially just starting out. I mean, I know how to do the breathing meditation, but beyond that, I don't know what the next step is, and I don't know really. I feel kind of lost. Would it be helpful to come here on Sundays and do the?
So, and we have a meditation. When did you say the next meditation class was, Susie? So you know that these.
And I was looking up the next Discovering Buddhism for you in September.
So these classes rotate. These beginner classes. There's Meditation 101 alternates with Buddhism in a nutshell. So it's Tuesday nights, and so we have 5 nights of this, and then a break, and then 5 nights of meditation, then a break. Now, some teachers, a lot of the teachers in Buddhism in a nutshell do teach meditation, and they begin classes with meditation, and we do. So I'm going to do the meditation on equanimity. I'm not good at that. You know, and I'm inspired to be better at it, but did you have some dates?
That's Meditation 101 at night is September 4th. And it's 5 nights.
Do you know who's teaching it? Anybody?
Oh, no. Once a week on Tuesday. Who's teaching that one?
Oh, he's great. Yeah. That's a good teacher. Very good teacher. I might come to that. Yeah, I might come to that. So there's some guided meditations in Venerable Amy Miller's book. There's a CD in the back. It's an 11-hour CD. There's a bunch of meditations. And she does the meditations on equanimity, where you're exchanging friend and enemy and stranger and so on, emptiness and
beautiful voice.
It's a very calming voice. It's interesting because we know her pretty. I say well. I mean we've been students of hers, and she's taught here. And she stays with when she comes to teach. She stays with Elise and David Strebel, and we always have a tea there to visit with her. So her voice is very familiar to me. But this video was made in 2003, so she was like maybe 40. Now she's 60, 45, I don't know. But anyway, it's 15 years ago this DVD was made. So, but her voice is exactly the same. And so in this audio CD, she does have that very calming voice, that very reassuring, easy to listen to voice.
There's also a book out there, How to Meditate, you might consider.
And so did you get the posture, meditation posture handout? I have one left. I passed those out the first night.
And they're all online, as he said.
They're all online.
I mean, not to discourage you from getting one, but they're all online if you need.
You're welcome. Jim, anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, those are good ways to get started for sure. And you mentioned coming on Sundays to listen to guests. That's always good. There's always, regardless of what level you're at, if you've never come before, you could just walk in the door and just sit and listen to them, and you're going to go away with something.
That was my question.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to come, and feel you don't have enough background.
And that's every Sunday, isn't it, basically?
Yes. You can look online again on Facebook or on the website, and you'll get an idea. But Kimberly was asking about where Venerable Amy learned things, and I was trying. What can you tell them about India, FPMT, Lama Zopa?
So yes, so Kadampa Center is affiliated with the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, FPMT. That was founded by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's these two gentlemen on either side of His Holiness in the back. I don't know if you can see around the screen. So in the 60s and 70s, my generation was going to Asia to study meditation. And some of my generation were experimenting with mind-enhancing substances. Timothy Leary was one, you might have heard of him. Timothy Leary and Ram Dass. So many people, and the Beatles were going to India, studying transcendental meditation. So all these hippies, as Geshe-la says, were showing up in Nepal and Kathmandu and different monasteries in Asia with their bell bottoms. He didn't know what the word was for bell bottoms. He kept holding up his pants and he was doing like this. But that generation. And so Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe thought, well, instead of having all these Westerners come to India, we should go to North America and teach. So they did. They started coming here in the early 70s, and they established one or two centers. They would teach one teacher, and then that teacher would teach other teachers, and they would travel back and forth. And those centers multiplied and became the FPMT. So there are about 160 worldwide, and they're all over Europe, North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand. I took a course that's called the Foundation of Buddhist Thought. It's a 2-year online course, and my classmates, there were like 18 people in my module, were from Spain, Belarus. It was an amazing experience. And all of that come from Lama Zopa and Lama Rinpoche. Venerable Amy was in Nepal. I don't remember for what reason, and we have a monastery, Kopan Monastery, and that's in Nepal. That's where Dr. Brown and Dr. Watkins first were exposed to the Dharma.
Dr. Brown
Founded the center 25 years ago in his living room through the encouragement of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Then they moved to the basement of the office building, and we bought this. We own, we have a mortgage. We own this building, but that was another long answer. Sorry, another long explanation. Did that explain very much?
Yeah, I didn't catch where she says she practiced. Everybody else was saying Tibet, and hers was different.
She lives in Philadelphia. Her father's elderly, and she's been living with him. But she travels she teaches all over the world. She was here 2 weeks ago for the Nyingma, the week-long retreat that they did here. Did you do that?
No, I did.
Okay. She also leads retreats to Ladao in the Himalayas. How you say it? Ladao, yeah. So we have these other teachers in our lineage, Asanga, these famous teachers that meditated for years. Oh. Yeah, this was hundreds of years ago. But Venerable Amy leads those retreats, and a group of us are going to India in November with Geshe Sangpo, and all of the nuns now are going. Lamala, yeah, all of the nuns, Chukula's go, Chukula, Lamala. So we're going to live in Sarajay Monastery for a week, and then we're going to fly to Delhi, and we'll spend a week in Bodh Gaya. So that's all through the center.
I don't know if you were getting at this, but back in the 70s, there weren't that many teachings that were translated.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're very fortunate. A lot of the books that we have out here in English are pretty recent in the scope of time. So you're not that far behind. But she was there, and then they asked her to go elsewhere. So she learned there, and
yes, yeah. So Buddhism is fairly recent in the West. So the words Buddhist and Buddhism does not appear in textbooks until the 1700s. So the Asians, the practitioners at the time of the Buddha and the time of some of these teachers, Nagarjuna and Asanga and some of these people, there was no word, there was the Buddha, even Sanskrit for awaken, but there was no word for Buddhism or Buddhist. They were followers, and it was known as the way. So and I can't remember who one of the earliest philosophers that were studying the Buddhist teachings in the 1700s from Europe coined the terms. That's when the terms Buddhist and Buddhism first appears, because the Westerners, we label everything. It's just we got to label everything. And so they did. Now, one of the first English translations was in the 1920s. It was the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a very unique textbook. There are two English translations. Professor Robert Thurman translated one as well. But that's not, so when they translated it from Sanskrit or from Tibetan to English, there was not a Tibetan title, Book of the Dead. That's what the English translator titled it. So the Tibetans didn't have a book that said the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But it's a description of rebirth and karma and so on. And it's a handbook for practitioners to prepare for their next birth when they get old. But yeah, so most of the translations from Tibetan to Sanskrit to English start in the 60s, 70s.
I see that there's a retreat coming up. Are you all going? I think it said September or something. Something.
I don't know about that one.
I don't know. It just said retreat.
There's a family retreat in the mountains. Christy's doing that with the kids.
I should know.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, but so we have there's one of our members has a farm in Chatham County, Nolan's Buddhist Farm, and so we have retreats there. Sometimes we have retreats here. In Buddhism, in the Discovering Buddhism, there's a practice day or retreat. At the end of each course, there's usually a practice day, and they do that sometimes on a Saturday where everybody comes here and has retreat. And there's just very little talking, meditation, short teachings, and then introspection and meditation. So I don't know of anything in September.
You might have been looking at the camping.
Yeah, there's a family, I don't know what to call it, camping something. Other questions? Because this whole last part I've left open for to try to encourage people to ask these questions.
I have a non-bright question.
Go ahead, Wendy.
No, it's really. What's the difference between the Buddha that you see in the stores with
Hodel. You're talking about Hodel.
Yes.
The fat guy.
Yes, this big man.
That's not that's a monk. That's a Chinese monk from the 10th century. His name was Hotle. Hodel, and there was a Chinese name. He was a very generous, I don't know how he became famous, but he's just a very generous, gregarious. Children loved him. It was kind of like a Santa Claus figure. That's me talking. But so he was well known in his village as being a really happy, gregarious, and I mean, monks are beggars. So for him to be fat, I mean, he was doing a lot of begging. I mean, that's what monk means, is beggar. So they had the alms bowl, and they would go out in the village with their bowl, and that's the way they ate. That's how they were fed. And I'm assuming he was real popular. But he's in the Chinese restaurants, they're really fat, and he's doing, yeah.
There's other types of Buddhism, you know, Vietnam
Yeah.
and China and Japan. And
Yeah, but he was not a Buddha. That's not a Buddha. I mean, people use that. My brother-in-law was in Vietnam, and that's what he uses. He's got, you know, he don't. When I try to explain, he didn't care. I mean, that's what he learned. That's the way he learned. You know, it's in Vietnam. That's what they. That's
well, whatever he thinks.
Yeah, it's his. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
fine, right?
Yeah. So, thank you for asking that. I've never been asked that before. Hodel, or Hoodle.
And this is just the modern Buddha. I mean, I know I'm not as familiar as I should be with the other Buddhas. Is the next one Maitreya or?
That's the Buddha that will come when all knowledge of Siddhartha Gautama has been lost. Maitreya. See, that's the interesting thing that people don't catch about the teachings on Asanga. Those 12 years he spent in that cave, because he says that he was receiving teachings from Maitreya, and that's not a...
Time is relative.
Yes.
What part in the process of learning do you learn about his actual path, his history, is there such a thing as
yes,
that?
yeah. You know, they didn't write the first time any of this was written was in Sri Lanka in like the 1st century BC. So this practice was not 1,000. It was very old. It was an oral tradition. We know his parents' name. We know where he was born. It's in present-day Nepal. He was married. He got married. He had a child. Yeah, and some non-Buddhist traditions are critical of that because he left them. You know, he went on the 6 years of living aesthetically, not eating, not, you know, depriving himself of food, to trying to force this awareness of understanding. And so he left his wife and child in the palace. Of course, knows, you know, he was born a prince. He was going to inherit that kingdom. I mean, that's what his father wanted, was for him to inherit the kingdom. And he rejected that. And I guess his son inherited it, is what, you know. But one of the... Yeah. And Venerable Amy talks about it on her disc. She describes his life, something of his life. But his mother died soon after he was born. He was raised by his aunt, who became a nun. So women had positions of power in Buddhism early. And His Holiness has said if we have another Dalai Lama, we've got to deal with not having a Panchen Lama. The communist Chinese have kidnapped the teacher that is supposed to identify the next Dalai Lama, because they want to. It's a political issue, so they can say whoever they want. But the Dalai Lama said there's no reason that the next Dalai Lama is not a woman. And Geshis, we have female Geshis, Geshimas. So there's Buddhism is very discriminatory of gender, of any race. I mean, the Buddha, one of the reasons the Buddha was seemingly was not a fan of organized religion was because the caste system in India, you know, your success in life was based on your birth. So you had the Brahmin class was the highest class of people, and then, you know, the people at the bottom were the beggars in the streets that had nothing, you know, crippled people that. So he was very, very suspicious of religion, organized religion. So next Tuesday night, we're going to do emptiness. I've already done the slides. It's Chris's favorite topic, and so he's going to be here to help us out. So emptiness, this idea of emptiness is unique to Buddhism. A lot of these other concepts can be found in Hinduism, Jainism, and Bon, rebirth, karma, and so on. But emptiness, this idea of how things exist, is unique to Buddhism and is original to Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. And it will explain, hopefully, how things exist. Or at least we'll talk about it.
If everyone
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Too involved.
No, you're fine.
Seems to me. All right, if Buddhism is, you know, godless, and my question is kind of this. I'm asking what they believe. I'm not trying to sound like a sharpshooter or anything by any means.
Go ahead. No, that's
okay.
fine.
Do they believe? Does it teach something like you know, this universal consciousness? In other words, how can the Dalai Lama tell me, you know, who you really are? Or any teacher, or, you know, you read these things. The Karate guy, Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
He was supposedly is somebody reincarnated and was told that. Now, whether that's just something from People magazine or not, I don't know. But for another sentient being who's not connected to God, or is not the embodiment of all knowledge, the repository of all knowledge in the universe, what does Buddhism teach about them having that awareness? That Brad Neal, you know, is, and I don't even know.
I know.
I'm asking my own
Sure.
question. It's not that Brad Neal is someone else, or is it? Are they tapping into past lives, or a cosmic consciousness, a hive mind of all our consciousness?
No, not at all. So the implication there is that there is this essence of, is it Brad?
Yes.
There's this essence of Brad that might go forward to another life. And that's not the Buddhist concept at all. Brad is a label.
Right.
It's a label of what's, and we'll talk about that next week, aggregates, these heaps, 5 aggregates: form, consciousness, discrimination, what you like and don't like, you know. But Brad is only going to be in this life. The part of Brad that I'm talking to that is the housing of your karmic seeds, that's what goes to the next life. And it could be female.
Right.
It could be any gender, any race. And they say if you accumulated enough negative, non-virtuous karma in this life, that you may not be human in the next life. So there's not a Bradness that goes forward. So what we're kind of talking about is the difference between rebirth and reincarnation. Reincarnation seems to imply that the essence of the Dalai Lama has continued since the 13th century. And there's Lama Yeshe, supposedly has been reincarnated in Spain by Olse, O-L-S-E. He's now a film director. He attended monastery until and then when he was old enough, he decided not to follow in the teachings.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Who knows that someone was
So it's so real quickly.
The part about Brad, and I'm just being somewhat of a vessel, and that was a name given to me at birth, and I've done a whole lot of things good and not so good that have all contributed to what's going on here right now. But
so the way rebirth has been explained, the way I understand it, when there's been these historical incidences of a child remembering a prior life. That's apparently a fairly common occurrence. As those people that have a memory of a prior life age, that memory fades, and they don't recall it as well. And there have been several stories when I've challenged teachers about that issue. They give me examples to read, or do research on this person, that person, and the other person. So there's this child that had a memory of being a pilot, and told these stories about. And I can't remember all the details. Right. And they went back and they showed that all those things.
Should have probably described.
Well, he knew specific things, and so as to the 14th Dalai Lama, he was able to identify rosaries, a cane, and I don't know what this Panchen Lama that saw him, that recognized him and said this is the reincarnation of this man that died 20 years ago. I don't know. I don't understand that process. I mean, I know historically what they said this child recognized, and usually like 2 or 3.
There are books that have
yes. Yeah.
information.
I've got books all over my bookshelf. I stare at them every day.
Thank you. And I'll be back here on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Get time and a half for that, Chris? I'm 7 minutes over.